Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my next weekly reading check-in. So I ended up having a fairly successful reading week last week, and that is because after many weeks, your girl has not only finished Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, this is backwards, this is book 4 in the Stormlight Archive. I have been reading it since, well, technically, since last year. I think I picked it up in like December, and then I set it aside, and I did not pick it back up again until this month, and I had only gotten maybe like 50 or 100 pages in, which in a 1,200 page book doesn't mean very much. This book broke me. It made me cry, and this is the first Stormlight book that I've ever cried in, I'm pretty sure. So, that is a win. Obviously, it got 5 stars. It's a Sanderson book, and it's my channel. So, Rhythm of War ended up getting 5 full stars, and Kaladin's journey in this was way better, even in The Way of Kings. Like, way better even than in The Way of Kings, because him learning about himself and how to accept himself and how to deal with his emotions a little bit better were just, it was the best journey, honestly. I absolutely loved that. I loved that entire thing. Dalinar, while I love him as a character, continues to just be one of the more boring characters for me. I enjoy him, but nothing also, like, I don't know. Even Oathbringer for me wasn't a huge hit just because I didn't really care about a lot of the things that Dalinar was doing. Navani is the best part of Dalinar, in my opinion, so that might be controversial, but that's how I feel about it. Shallan's journey was something else. She spent way too much of this 1,200 page book hiding how she felt from Adolin, and that drove me absolutely insane because Adolin is my baby. And all he wanted to do was help her, and all she did was literally, she spent the majority of this book hiding away. Like, she spent so much of it in the background while Vale and Radiant were in the foreground, like kind of running things, and she was just kind of hiding in the back because she didn't know how to deal with her emotions. And I did not love that. There was an introduction of kind of another sort of personality of hers, if you could call it that, and that was actually awful. There were a lot of characters that went on a journey in this, and Adolin's, I think, was also really good, especially in comparison to what Shallan was going through, because he was dealing with a lot of stuff pertaining to his dad, and I felt so bad for him the whole time. But, like, him and Maya, and, like, there's this whole trial that goes on. It was so good, and it was so inspiring, and everything that happened with Maya during that trial, I cannot wait to see where that leads, because I'm so excited to see what's going to happen with it. Navani was another character who really shone through in this. She was somebody who I was, like, interested in previous books, but this book, which I think is technically supposed to be her books, but if it is, it's not really her book in the same way that the other ones belonged to the other characters, just because you don't get any flashbacks, not really, of Navani. Maybe, like, 1 or 2, but, like, the flashbacks in the other ones solely had to do with the character for that book, whereas the flashbacks in this actually pertained more to Venli, who is the listener that kind of set this entire thing in motion, because she kind of brought, like, the different forms to the Parshendi. So I don't know if there's technically, like, it's both of their books, because more of the flashbacks were spent on Venli and, like, developing her than on anything else. Like, I guess technically you could say that you know most of what's happened to Navani leading up until now, but not really. You don't get nearly as much of a detailed history for her as you do for everybody else. But she came into her own by the end, and she really accepted herself as a scholar and a scientist, and I loved that. I think that's a large part of why I love her so much, is because, like, of all of them, I do tend to relate to Navani the most, I think, and I love her character throughout all of these books. Yasna, she was there, but she wasn't particularly important the entire time. Rhythm of War really tied together the entire Cosmere. Rhythm of War, more so than any of the other Stormlight books, has made me want to go back all the way to Elantris and read all of them all over again and look for any hint of anything that relates to everything else. Like, I'm about to be that person that is obsessed with the Cosmere, because that's what Rhythm of War managed to do to me. But I loved it. I've been talking about it for too long. So that 5 stars. It was fantastic. I cried at the end. It broke me. Moving on. I also managed to finish House of Sky and Breath. I have an entire reading vlog, spoilery and non-spoilery aspects of it, going up hopefully this week, so I won't talk too much about this here. You guys will get my thoughts on it in way more detail, but I did finish it this week, finally, after way too long reading it. I ended up giving it 4 stars, maybe 4.5 stars. It was okay. The first one was definitely better, in my opinion, mostly because it didn't end on a cliffhanger. Apparently, I was in a multiverse book kind of mood this week, because that's what Sarah J. Maas managed to do in House of Sky and Breath. So, if you haven't heard that by now, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to spoil it for you, but there have literally been people all over BookTube talking about the Maasverse, so that's what this book introduced, and I have mixed feelings about it. Not the Maasverse as a whole. I have mixed feelings about the way that the end of this book went and the way that it ended, because you know how I am with cliffhangers, but it was good. I enjoyed my time through it. It was a quick read. It was a fun read for the most part. It was a heavy-hitting read in other aspects of it, and it was definitely an emotional ride. So, Sarah J. Maas delivered what I expected her to. And then the last book that I started and read was Pawn of Prophecy, which is the first book in the Belgariad by David and Lee Eddings. I started this yesterday and I finished it last night, and I really enjoyed it. It came out as 4 stars in my reading tracker, which is pretty much what I expected of it. I was reading this for the Belgariad-along that I'm doing with Z from You Can't Catch Z and Lauren from Lighting Lavender. We'll be doing a live show on it in a couple of weeks, so I'm really not going to talk about too many of my thoughts here. I finished it. I gave it 4 stars. The last book that I'm still in the middle of, but I do have super exciting news for, is Orbit sent me this. It got here yesterday, and it's absolutely as beautiful in person as it looked like it was going to be in all of the pictures. So just soak it in. Just look at all of it in its beautiful glory. There's the spine. There's the back. The Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynn. I about peed my pants when I found out I was getting a copy of this, because it doesn't come out until next month. I think that my reading of it is going to go a lot faster now that I have a physical copy and the e-arc, so I can't wait to continue reading this. I'm only like 20% of the way, and I really haven't made any progress on it this week, because I knew this was coming. So I kind of paused all of my reading on The Hunger of the Gods until this got in, and I can't wait to continue on in this. That's probably going to be my next big priority for the next couple of weeks, because you guys know how excited I was for this. And then the last one that I wanted to talk about was what I started today, which is The Viscount Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn. I haven't really talked about the Bridgerton series on my channel very much, but you guys know that I had a pretty lengthy journey with romance for the majority of my teenage and early 20s years, because that's all that I read. Literally, that's all that I read. Until I started getting back into fantasy and sci-fi and other things over the last couple of years when I started my channel. So I read all of the Bridgerton books, or at least as many as I could get my hands on. This is a theme for my channel, but when I was way too young to have actually been reading them. I fell in love with the Bridgertons probably when I was a preteen, maybe like very early teenager, but definitely like in those early teen years. And if I remember correctly, Anthony's journey was one of my favorites. Like, I love Daphne and I love Simon, but like I loved Anthony in his book, and I loved Kate because she was super relatable as a character. I really enjoyed her. But I started The Viscount Who Loved Me earlier today, and this is because season 2 of Bridgerton comes out this week? I want to say the 25th. I think it's this week, which is perfect because Hello Lovely is actually sending out a Viscount watch box to use for your watching of the Bridgerton season 2. I'm still debating. I might end up doing like a little watch-a-thon vlog where I use the stuff that's in the watch box, to be determined. I'm not promising anything, but all of that aside, I started reading The Viscount Who Loved Me again today via audiobook. It's just as great as I remember. I don't 100% love the narrator, but she's okay. She does a good job, and she gets across the humor of Julia Quinn's writing so well. Julia Quinn, if you guys haven't read any of the Bridgerton books, they're quirky historical romance. I mean, the humor in them is pretty trend-setting for its time. There weren't many people writing when Julia Quinn first wrote these in the 2000 is when this was done. And I fell in love with these. I fell in love with the humor, I fell in love with the characters, I fell in love with the fact that the women in them are such strong and generally would like to be independent, depending upon, you know, their circumstances in life and the men that are controlling them at that time. So the Bridgerton books have always been super special to me for that reason, and that's why I loved season 1 of Bridgerton so much. So season 2 of Bridgerton, I wanted to be prepared and do a quick reread of this before it came out. I haven't gotten super far. I'm listening to the audiobook, like I said. It looks like I made it 82 pages in via the audiobook, so it's only like a 12-hour long audiobook. I'm listening to it on 2 times the speed. I should get through it relatively quickly. I definitely plan to be done with it by the time the next season comes out so that I can, compare, hopefully favorably, which is not what I managed to do for The Duke and I, which was for season 1. I never reread that, actually. I just skipped to book 2. So this is what I'm planning on reading this week, this and The Hunger of the Gods. And then the last thing that I needed to talk about was the Magical Readathon, because this entire week has been the gearing up for the Aurelian Path week. I kind of fudged a little bit on it, and I am going to continue to do so because that's what G said that we could do in her video. She said we were not, tied down to last week in particular, and so if we needed a little bit of wiggle room, she was okay with that, and I took that and I ran. Because for the Magical Readathon, I needed a prompt that had a crystal in the cover, and I was planning on reading Jade War for that, and I did not because I was focusing on these chunky fantasies. So I decided to use King of Diamonds, which I had actually read the week before. The only one that I'm technically not fudging is that for the book with the blade on the cover, I am using the Belgariad because I'm not going to hold it closer so you can see, but he does have a knife. He's holding a knife on the cover of this book. So that counts. And then for an ebook, I am also using a book that I technically read the week before, and that's King of Vegas by C.N. Vega, which I talked about in my weekly reading check-in last week. I did not have time to read those this week, so that's pretty much the only thing that I fudged. I only had those 3 prompts, and I'm gonna consider it a win, because G said that we could consider it a win. So that's what we're gonna do. But anyway, that is it for this week's weekly check-in. How did your guys' reading go last week? Did you have anything that you really, really loved? Did you have anything that you really, really hated? Did you pull what I did a couple of weeks ago and just not really get anything finished at all? Because that's what I'm used to doing on these videos for the most part. But yeah, let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more content from me. Down in the description box, you're going to see rep codes and links to my Goodreads, my Twitter, and my Instagram in case you guys wanted to follow me on any of those. But other than that, that is it for me today, guys. So I will talk to you in my next video. Bye!